Hayes. Every individual charged in the indictment is charged with one count of violating Georgia's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act through participation in a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21. Specifically, the participants in association took various actions in Georgia and elsewhere to block the counting of the votes of the presidential electors who were certified as the winners of Georgia's 2020 general election. As you examine the indictment, you will see acts that are identified as overt acts and those that are identified as predicate acts, sometimes called acts of racketeering activity. Overt acts are not necessarily crimes under Georgia law in isolation, but are alleged to be acts taken in furtherance of the conspiracy. Many occurred in Georgia, and some occurred in other jurisdictions and are included because the grand jury believes they were part of the illegal effort to overturn the results of Georgia's 2020 presidential election. The acts identified as predicate acts or acts of racketeering activity are crimes that are alleged to have been committed in furtherance of the criminal enterprise. Acts of racketeering activity are also charged as separate counts in the indictment against those who are alleged to have committed them. All elections in our nation are administered by these states, which are given the responsibility of ensuring a fair process and an accurate counting of the votes. That includes elections for presidential electors, Congress, state officials, and local offices. The state's role in this process is essential to the functioning of our democracy. Georgia, like every state, has laws that allow those who believe that results of an election are wrong, whether because of intentional wrongdoing or unintentional error, to challenge those results in our state courts. The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result. Subsequent to the indictment, as is the normal process in Georgia law, the grand jury issued arrest warrants for those who are charged. I am giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon on Friday, the 25th day of August, 2023. I remind everyone here that an indictment is only a series of allegations based on a grand jury's determination of probable cause to support the charges. It is now the duty of my office to prove these charges in the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. I would like to take a moment to thank the Superior Court Clerk, Shay Alexander, and her staff for staying late and making sure that this indictment was processed. I would also like to thank the men and women of Sheriff Labatt's office for keeping the courthouse open, but most importantly for keeping us safe over the weeks and months that have led up to this indictment, and for what I know they will continue to do to keep us safe. We also want to thank the Atlanta Police Department and other law enforcement partners who have worked with the sheriff to keep us safe. I will now take a very limited number of questions prior to going to sleep.
I'll go first. If you don't mind, Savannah Levins with 11 Alive. Quick question: can you clarify in Georgia the mandatory minimum when it comes to RICO charges, whether it's servable by probation or how that might play out?
The RICO charges has time that you have to serve, so it is not a probated sentence.
Madam District Attorney, what's the timetable for your trial?
What is the timetable for the trial?
Yes.
As you know, in this jurisdiction, trials are set by the judges, and so it will be the judge that sets the date of the trial. This office will be submitting a proposed scheduling order within this week. However, that will totally be at the discretion of the judge.
You're the fourth person, the fourth jurisdiction now to indict Donald Trump. Do you believe you need to be the fourth one to try him, or could you move it up? Do you want to be the first to try him?
I don't have any desire to be first or last. I want to try him and be respectful for our sovereign states. We do want to move this case along, and so we will be asking for a proposed order that occurs a trial date within the next 6 months.
Have you had any contact? Earlier today, there was a fictitious document, according to the Fulton County Clerk's Office, that was circulated online with charges against former President Donald Trump. That fictitious document matched exactly the charges that we now see in this indictment. Can you tell us more about that document leak? Because now you have the former president's lawyers who are saying that this is emblematic of a serious problem with your office.
No, I can't tell you anything about what you refer to. What I can tell you is that we had a grand jury here in Fulton County. They deliberated till almost 8 o'clock, if not right after 8 o'clock. An indictment was returned. It was true billed, and you now have an indictment. I am not an expert on clerks' duties or even administrative duties. I wouldn't know how to work that system, and so I'm not going to speculate. Next question.
Have you had any contact with the special counsel about overlap between these cases, and do you intend to try all of these defendants together?
Do I intend to try the 19 defendants in this indictment together? Yes.
And have you had any contact with the special counsel about the overlap between this indictment and the federal indictment?
I'm not going to discuss our investigation at this time.
Have there been any conversations?
The arguments made by former President Trump that this is a politically motivated indictment.
I make decisions in this office based on the facts and the law. The law is completely nonpartisan. That's how decisions are made in every case. To date, this office has indicted, since I've been sitting as the district attorney, over 12,000 cases. This is the 11th RICO indictment. We followed the same process. We look at the facts, we look at the law, and we bring charges.
Have there been conversations about the terms of surrender?
Will you try this case yourself, Ms. Willis?
Has the jury been cleared?
Get down.
Connie Willis of Fulton County, Georgia, speaking to reporters just days after former President Donald Trump was indicted by the special counsel in Washington on the federal level for an alleged conspiracy to defraud the United States. The former president, also the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 primary race, now faces charges in Georgia, in Fulton County, for alleged racketeering. Alongside the federal case, it's very similar in scope, about an alleged conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. So now in the United States, two cases playing out simultaneously, one on the state level in Georgia, one on the federal level. Nicole Killian is outside the courthouse in Fulton County. Nicole, your report on what the district attorney had to say.
Well, notable again that she outlined 41 felony charges against the former president and 18 other defendants, many of whom are the former president's top allies and aides. And she said that every individual is charged with one count of RICO, or these racketeering charges we've been discussed, through their participation in criminal enterprise to allow the former president to seize the term of office back in 2020. Now, in that Q&A, she did talk about wanting to move this trial along. She said she didn't necessarily want to be first or last, but when appropriate. And furthermore, what was most significant is that she said that all of these defendants have until Friday, August 25th at noon to voluntarily surrender. Otherwise, a warrant could be issued for their arrest. So that is kind of the next process, the step forward. She said that they would put a scheduling order forth to the judge. Obviously, it's up to a judge, as she mentioned, to determine when a potential trial could be scheduled. But it was also notable that she said that she does intend to try all of these individuals together.
Nicole, thank you very much for your excellent reporting. Jeff Pegues covers the Justice Department here with me at the table. Looking over this indictment on page 57, for example, it talks about an episode in the Oval Office on January 4th, 2021, where John Eastman told Pence in front of Trump to try to overturn the election, to buy into Eastman's plan. This has been a crucial part of the January 6th investigation on Capitol Hill, now with the special counsel, and now you see it in this indictment in Georgia. What does that mean to have something that happened in Washington in the Oval Office part of a state indictment? And is that part of how you see the racketeering charge here?
Yeah, it's part of what prosecutors believe in this case is this vast criminal enterprise. We talked earlier about how RICO charges are used in mob and gangland cases. Typically, in some of those cases, you'll use wiretaps. Investigators will use wiretaps to gather information. But in this case, they have some audio recordings, as I said before, but also they have some of these conversations captured in witness statements, perhaps, to the grand jury. So they have information that we have not heard thus far from some of these charges that the special counsel has brought. And so I find that fascinating about this case. She talks about it being more than just about what happened in Georgia, but also in other states across the country and in Washington, D.C.
Don Samuel, a veteran criminal lawyer with us. Don, you listened closely to what District Attorney Willis had to say. As a lawyer, as someone who knows the courtroom, knows this world, what was your interpretation in view of what she had to say tonight?
Well, I think it was a little unrealistic to think that a case like this could go to trial in 6 months. That's just it's really a virtual impossibility to have 19 defendants prepared to go to trial in 6 months in a case of this size, unless there's going to be, a tsunami of guilty pleas from a number of the defendants. That's just not practical. The difficulty of finding a jury in a case like this, there's another large RICO case going on in Fulton County right now that is expected to last 18 months. 18 months. How do you find jurors who can set aside their business, their lives, to some extent be separated from family for 18 months to try this case? It's taken 9 months in that case just to find a jury. And the same thing is going to be true in this case, not only because of the length of the trial, but because of the amount of the pretrial publicity to find enough jurors who would be qualified to serve. So this case is not going to trial in 6 months. There's not a judge in Georgia who would set that kind of timetable, which is just impossible to meet. The breadth of the indictment, just some of the people are charged with conduct that occurred, as I said earlier, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, Arizona, in Washington, D.C., to say nothing of Georgia. The amount of investigation needed just by the defense for each of these defendants. It's just, this case is going to be going on, as Ricky Kleeman said before, for years before it ever gets to a trial. Unless a judge severs it and just says, we're going to do groups of 3 or 4 people at a time, in which case it could be somewhat faster.
Appreciate that, Don Samuel. Nicole Killian, we'll go back to you outside the courthouse. What's the scene like there? There was much talk about security concerns for months about this indictment in Georgia. Many Trump supporters in the state and others. What is it like there tonight? Quiet or something else?
Well, at this point, it is relatively quiet, albeit those of us here in the media who have been waiting for this indictment to be put out, and of course waiting for the district attorney to give her press conference. At this point in time, we believe the courthouse is closed. We know that the sheriff's deputies were trying to clear it a little while ago, and so really the scene is relatively calm. That being said, I would note that some of the former president's allies, most notably some who were associated with the rally that the former president had on January 6th at the Ellipse before the attack on the Capitol, have called for people to demonstrate and to show up here at the courthouse when and if the former president is arraigned. So that is something to watch, because there has been concern again about security, about threats. It is why this courthouse has been barricaded for the past 3 weeks, more or less, and why security has been very tight here, not just today, but again, over an extended period of time. So we will have to see if that gets extended beyond this week. The sheriff has previously said that he feels that his department is ready, that they are prepared to handle protesters, that they have been fielding some of these dozens of threats that the district attorney and other county officials have received, but it does remain a concern writ large here in the county.
Nicole, when former President Trump arrives in Fulton County, what's it going to be like for him inside that courthouse? Will he receive a mugshot? Will he be processed, fingerprinted, put in handcuffs? What do you expect to actually happen?
Well, the sheriff has made clear that he is going to treat the former president and any defendant, for that matter, just like anyone else, that he will follow the normal practices, as he said, and that could include a mugshot. Now, what is unclear is we don't know where exactly the former president could be processed. If it's here at the courthouse, because typically most people are processed at the Fulton County Jail, which is some distance from here. And so that is something, of course, that we will be watching for. But just like all of these indictments and these court appearances, it is likely to be a huge spectacle. We already have media, camped out, taking up the entire city block behind me. And just like in Washington, just like in Miami, just like in New York, where we saw the former president make an appearance in court, it not only draws huge media attention, but also potentially can draw protesters as well. So there is, again, a desire to keep a secure perimeter, to make sure that they can keep the courthouse functioning during that period of time. But it will be a heavy lift across the board, likely to include a number of not only local law enforcement agencies, but federal as well, as they prepare for the former president to potentially come here to Atlanta.
Thank you, Nicole Killian. Trevian Cootie is among those charged tonight. She is Kanye West's former publicist who traveled to Georgia election worker Ruby Freeman's home when she was getting death threats and tried to convince her to admit the election was stolen. Freeman was falsely accused by former President Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, of committing voter fraud during the 2020 election. And the January 6th committee, as you remember, asked her about how those accusations affected her and her personal life.
Now I won't even introduce myself by my name anymore. I get nervous when I bump into someone I know in the grocery store who says my name. I'm worried about who's listening. I get nervous when I have to give my name for food orders. I'm always concerned of who's around me. I've lost my name and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people starting.
We just heard from Ruby Freeman. Nicole Killian, this is a story that's not just about this alleged scheme. It involves many people, real people, whose lives were affected by what went on in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, that's right. And this indictment references some of the harassment that was faced by Fulton County election workers like Ruby Freeman, who you just heard from, and who we also heard from during those January 6th select committee hearings, with a very impassioned and emotional testimony in terms of the personal impact, the death threats that they received as a result of the former president and individuals like Rudy Giuliani uttering their name and accusing them of election fraud, which ultimately proved to be untrue. In fact, there is also litigation still pending involving Rudy Giuliani and these two Fulton County election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. So to your point, this is a very not only sprawling case that we are dealing with right now, but part of ongoing litigation that spreads much wider and beyond.
Thank you, Nicole Killian. To recap tonight, former President Donald Trump has been indicted by a Fulton County grand jury on 13 counts related to his alleged efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss to now President Joe Biden. The charges include conspiracy and racketeering, which is often used to target members of organized crime. This is Trump's fourth criminal indictment in less than 5 months. 18 others in Trump's inner circle and orbit have also been indicted, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and lawyers Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tomorrow on CBS Mornings. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Robert Costa in Washington.